No Cap Fund presents The Representation Station. All right, welcome Representation fans. We are back with another live stream. Tonight we have two special guests from the new Rhino Coalition. Chris Rauen and Wiencek are joining us today. And before we get to them, let's go around the horn and meet our crew. So first up, we have Walter Clapp, our president. Walter, share a little bit about yourself with the people tonight.
Hello, people. My name is Walter Clapp. I'm the president here at the No Cap Fund. Started this a little over a year ago, and really excited to just be talking with you about the importance of representation as a professional in the context of elections and our electors, and specifically the House of Representatives. If we want to rebuild truth and trust, we believe it needs to start in the U.S. House of Representatives. And please find out more, volunteer, donate at www.why435.org.
Walter doesn't have his banner tonight because he's at his cabin. Next up is Roger, our treasurer. Roger, share a little bit about yourself with the people tonight. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm stealing Walter's thunder. My name is Roger Scott. I'm a CPA in North Carolina, and I'm here to share knowledge, to spread knowledge. Among the many things I do, I dabble in. I'm a college professor, so I'm all about knowledge transfer.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And as I mentioned before, our guests tonight are from the new Rhino Coalition. So those who aren't familiar, X has this great feature called Spaces. And they started a space, and they get... You know, I've popped in a bunch of times, listened to some really cool conversations on there, and I thought, hey, these would be great people. They've got this big group. I see, 200, 300, 400 people listening to these spaces. So it's like, I wonder what they think about reform. So we got them on the show. Chris and Jacob, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit tonight? I'll let Chris go first.
Sure, I'll go first. So Chris Rauen, I live out here in Northern California, and I think really how these spaces evolved, it came out of a community that was in favor of Nikki Haley for president last year. There were about maybe 100 people that were a part of that community on X or Twitter, if you prefer. At that time, we were supporters, and we started spaces because that was kind of a newish thing. And we thought it would be a great place to try to bring new volunteers in to help as keyboard warriors across the country, as well as volunteers in specific states where we could try to hopefully change or at least get the MAGA stranglehold off the Republican Party and, return it to sanity. And we felt that at that point, Nikki Haley was the only one really that stood out. I mean, she had everybody else had dropped out of the primary at that point. So it was just her and Trump. And so we were all in behind her with a completely different vision for the Republican Party than MAGA. And that's hence why we have rebranded ourselves the Rhino Coalition, because everyone that Trump refers to who is not MAGA is a Rhino. So, okay, we've accepted that. He was referring to Nikki Haley as one for a time, and Mitt Romney, and even the late John McCain and others. And so these are people we look up to. And the Bushes, the Bush family, Bush Sr. and Bush 43. So we're like, okay. We had started with the name of our community as the New Republican Collaborative, and we called it a collaborative because we wanted it to be a place where actual conservative thought, real conservative thought in the mold of Reagan and Buckley and Eisenhower could come together, and we would be that mission carrying forward what Nikki Haley had started, we felt, in the primary process. And when she dropped out in March of 2024, we wanted to carry that mission forward, and so we did. But after the election in December, it was very clear that we had to change our name, and so we did. And so that's how the Rhino thing got born. Jacob could tell you more.
I love how you're just like, I'm gonna own that name. You can't use it to hurt me anymore.
Exactly.
Jacob, go ahead.
All right. Aloha mai kako, Jacob Wiencek here, coming to you live from Honolulu in the great state of Hawaii. Yeah, no, just Chris really hit all the high points about how New Rhino coalition got started and how it's evolved since over the course of really almost the last 2 years, going through the presidential season. And then, as we are in the era of the second Trump administration, how, it's almost like a weekly whiplash every day of how to, principle, what were once considered principled conservatives in the not too distant past. How do we keep our heads about ourselves? How do we keep our wits about ourselves without losing it in just the day to day of what's going on? So looking forward to today. Thanks, everyone, for having us on. And I look forward to what should be a great discussion.
Awesome. Thank you guys. So last week we had Mr. Beat on. It was a lot of fun, and we did like an around the horn style recording with him, where I asked questions and each one of you guys kind of chimed in. And I think Roger and Walter and I had a great time doing that. So we're gonna try that again today. So I think most people can admit that things are kind of broken, right? I mean, that's why we're all here. We're frustrated with the people that are leading us. We are, frustrated with maybe the rules that are in place that aren't reflecting our true values or ideas. And, what we want to do here at Uncap the House is we want to talk about how we fix them, right? And my first question for you, Chris and Jacob, is what's the new Rhino coalition? What do you want its leaders to focus on? Oh, we lost Jacob there. So I'm sure he'll be back. Chris, you're up because he's gone. So you're up first. He'll be back in a minute.
I'm sure he'll be back. Yeah, I'm sure he'll be back. What we talk about in our spaces and have since March of 24, when Nikki Haley dropped out, who, again, I go back and compare her to what we felt was more of a authoritarian, a America First type of movement, which to me isn't Republican at all. It's not conservative at all. It doesn't speak conservative. It's not even sane. It's not principled. And what we're trying to do is, and I think that trying to do is very difficult right now. I should say maybe what we're discussing in these spaces when we have those several hundred people in there that you mentioned is how do we get back to a place in America where government is governing from the sane middle, right? The people who also would be reflective of the views of the majority of America, not the extremes of the left or of the right, but of the middle. And that can include rational conservatives, moderates, independents, and that makes up a bulk of our audience. And so when we speak to that, we're talking about really what was the Republican Party 30 years ago or even 20 years ago. And to some degree, maybe conservative Democrats, because we've had them in our spaces as well, too, talk about wanting to bring just, some proper discourse to the dialogue that we're having, as opposed to what seems to be just very unprincipled fights in Congress. We have an executive branch now that is so far overreaching, it's acting like, Hungary or someplace. It's not normal for America. And we called this all out before the election. We said this is what you're going to get if you vote for Trump. And oh no, it's just going to be just like it was during his first term, and they'll have all these good Republicans in there to guide him. And no, we said no, it's not going to be that at all. He has set out an agenda. This is what it's going to be, and now people are going, oh, now I see that you were right. And it's like, yes, we were. So I know it's at the same time. I think that answers your question. I hope, but really, it's just some rational viewpoint and rational policy back to politics again, especially from the legislative branch, which I know speaks to your mission.
So what is that rational policy, though? Like, what does the new Rhino coalition consider the rational policy it wants its leaders to put forth? Like Trump's gone. We're in 2028 now, right? Or 20, whatever the next election is. And he's now gone. You've got a new presidential race happening. Your leader, right? Nikki Haley's competing. Ron DeSantis is competing. What do you want those people to say to bring you guys on board to vote for them next time?
Well, if I can bring it up, I know it's not really direct to legislative, but it kind of is, I guess. Foreign policy wise, we have abandoned, uh, and we've talked a lot about this in our spaces too, we've abandoned our allies. And I am a student of history and World War II. My parents were a little older and they remember those times. And this is not, a president that represents anything that we have done in the past to support NATO, to support countries like Ukraine, for example. Right now, just going through everything that it's going through, and we can be supporting them. And there's no acknowledgement from this administration that Putin is up to no good. I mean that he's a dictator and a thug. And Nikki Haley called all that out, and other conservatives who are now leaving Congress or have left Congress called it out, and Democrats are calling it out. But what happened to the rest of the Republican Party? They're not. They're all happy with Russia. I'm just using that as one example. Legislatively, tariffs don't work. That's pretty obvious, and we need to rein in President Trump on that. And it looks like the judges are doing that. That's something that needs to be decided in Congress. We need to see the legislative branch just step up. They are not doing anything on their own against the overreach from what seems to be basically an executive branch that's gone rogue.
Okay. So, Jacob, welcome back. I'm going to get to you here in just a second. So, I'm going to pitch this over to Walter. And so, I asked, what does the new Rhino coalition want its leaders to focus on? Walter, I know what you want our leaders to focus on. What I want to ask you is, how does what you want them to focus on help what Chris was just talking about, foreign policies and tariffs? How does uncapping the House help with kind of giving them the power that they want to have a say over these two issues?
Yeah, I think stability comes through a legislative body that is responsive to the long-lasting and sustained concerns and demands of the people rather than the whims of an executive. And the legislature has the power of the purse, and so uncapping the House, restoring that power of the purse back to the legislature and taking it back from the executive, from that delegation of power, allows Congress to then use its power of the purse to tell the president, what you're doing is, if not unconstitutional, reprehensible, and we therefore demand you change course, or you don't get your next round of budget funding for your White House renovation, or whatever else is very near and dear to the president's heart. And I think that ultimately that's what our allies need to see is, rather than these swings from president to president, changing wildly policy via executive order and these executive orders, we want legislation that is lasting and cohesive and reasonable. And we're not going to get that if we're swinging between the extremes of the polarized two-party system that we currently exist in. And so, what will come exactly out of an uncapped House, we can't know, but I feel firmly that it will be more stable than a unitary executive unchecked by an executive branch. And likewise, the courts were mentioned by Chris, and if we're going to reform the courts, if we're going to reform anything, right, we need a body that the people trust to conduct those reforms. And frankly, that body doesn't exist. There is no trusted body remaining in the federal government, unfortunately, not one that has broad support. And so that's one of my firm belief is that we must uncap the House, rebuild trust in the House, and then the House could make very studied and thoughtful reforms that do start to create more lasting stability that, is going to, I think, understandably recognize the tension between conservatism and progressivism, but is not unprincipled, just kind of the will and whim of one person. So that would be my thoughts.
So I want to back up to something you just said there for a second before we move on to Roger. Is you mentioned the two-party system, the polarization between the two-party system, and we've talked about it before on the show. Like, we talk about representation. There's other groups out there talking about representation. One of them is Lee Drutman's group, right? And he's got this this book. It's a great book. It's called Breaking the Two-Party Doom Loop. And in it, he talks about the polarization of the two parties the way that they are, but he also talks about 30, 40 years ago, when the ratio of people to representative was much more fair and balanced, there was actually kind of four parties there. There was like a conservative Democratic Party and a liberal Democratic Party, and a conservative or in a progressive Democratic Party, and a conservative Republican and a progressive Republican. And because of this, it was almost like a four-party system because the House was large enough for the size of people that there was. Now, he makes the argument, a different argument than we make. He makes an argument for proportional representation and ranked choice voting. Obviously, I haven't learned enough about proportional representation to go with that. We want to uncap the House, our first step. But I do think it's an interesting point, that you bring up about like uncapping the House helps depolarize the system. And we have proof of that. We have really smart people writing about, back 50 years ago, we didn't have this polarized this system. And one thing that we had was a larger House in comparison to the population that we have now. But I want to get Roger's take on this. Roger, I know you say this all the time. Uncapping the House helps you get whatever thing you want to get done. Tell us why it helps with these two issues.
Well, something Chris had said earlier in this conversation about wanting to get back to the middle. How do we convince people to gravitate more to the middle and ignore the noise on the extremes? I've said forever, uncap the House to re-marginalize the extremists, right? These extremist members of Congress, they're only there for attention, for various reasons. They're not interested in getting any work done, and so no work gets done. Uncapping the House would certainly help, in that way. And to follow up on Jeff's comment, again, another line that I use a lot is, no matter what particular reform, governmental reform you support, your odds of success improve when we uncap the House. Largely for the same reason. The extremists are further out. You're much more likely to get common sense, beneficial legislation pushed through with a larger body, larger House.
All right. So Jacob, we're going to come back to you. Now, your question was, what do you want the new coalition, or what does the new Rhino coalition want its leaders to focus on? Chris mentioned foreign policy and tariffs. Is that what you're hearing, or are you hearing something? Is there something else that you're hearing out there? Or maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Well, when we're having our spaces, we get a whole real wide variety of people, and we definitely do get some heavy hitters for national security, foreign affairs, trade, tariffs, and if you look at what's going on in those spaces, the Trump-Vance team is just particularly bad. For myself, I know I always do like to bring up that when we're talking about reform and getting engaged and what we can accomplish, right? I love what Uncap the House is doing. I've been on the bandwagon before I think you guys officially started about we need to expand the size of the House of Representatives. That's a real achievable policy that we can do through simple federal law. And at the federal level, that will help. But I also do like to really push that, we have agency about what's going on in our local affairs and our state affairs, right? So much of what we want to resolve, right? Like the challenges we face in our communities, and a lot of what impacts us happens really at the local, at that state level. And always try to encourage people to focus on, you can have a lot more agency, focus, and get a lot more results by focusing on that lower level. And, that's something I try to live by out here in Hawaii, right? We're definitely a lot farther away from DC than some of the other states. And you definitely feel the distance. And, to me, that's, made me focus more about what's going on here and, what I can change on the ground level. We shouldn't lose sight of these broader federal reforms we're pushing. But, just to circle it back, you know, we can't ignore that, focus what's going on locally, focus what's going on statewide. So that way, you don't let those guys off the hook either.
Yeah.
Keeps coming up every week, man. Every week. There's a lot of that sentiment out there. We hear it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had Camille from New Patriot Foundation on a few weeks ago, and as Roger kind of just alluded to, and she spoke exactly to that. And they're focusing like at a local level too. And I think you're right. I mean, and that's what you want. You want a government that's close enough to touch that you can have a say in, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with our federal government by expanding the representatives. Chris, I'm going to come back to you just for a second here before we move on to our next question. Did you have any rebuttal or anything you wanted to add as everybody kind of went around the horn? As
No, the only comment that I had is, unlike Jacob, though, I am relatively new to this concept that you guys have come up with here at New Cap. I think it's a good one. It's worth exploring. Like I said, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around the idea because I know that we have had, 435 representatives in the House of Representatives for quite some time. I don't know that there's been a major change or shift in the last few decades, for that matter. But at the same time, like I have a congressman in my own district out here in California who we'll see how the redistricting plays out. But he is one guy who's representing multiple counties in Northern California, particularly after the redistricting is done. It's going to be so many that it makes him vulnerable, which is okay in my book. I mean, he's conservative, but he's getting a little bit too far into the MAGA realm for my taste. But at the same time, I mean, we'll see what happens. It is going to make it more competitive for him. So I don't know if that means that, okay, well then maybe all these 5 or 6 or 7 counties that one representative is. I mean, this question for you, I guess, more in the comment, is it going to be that we will have 2 representatives now in this region or this district as opposed to 1 or maybe 3? How does that change in other states as well, too?
Well, so to get to your point, we haven't had change on the representative side in over 100 years. We haven't written a new apportionment bill since the permanent apportionment bill of 1929, which capped the number of seats at 435. The population was around 100 million then. It's almost 340 million or plus now. The representative to citizen ratio was 1 for 220,000. It's now 1 for nearly 800,000. And to answer your question is, we don't know yet, right? It depends on what we write the new apportionment bill. How many more representatives we get is the question we should be asking our leaders at the end of the day. And that's what I would say is, like, if you were going to ask me this question, what should New Rhino Coalition talk about? It should talk about this. It should get their 200 to 300 people saying, this is the thing. If you want power, if you want agency, if you want to have a say in all these things that you're talking about, the only way to do that in our democratic republic is through representation. That's your power. And it's been capped for 100 years at 435. And if you want it back, you need to talk about it. You need to use the right words. You need to say, hey, I want representation. I want power. I want agency in this. Sorry, I got on my soapbox there a little bit. I know Walter had his hand raised. Walter, yeah. I'm going to go to you real quick before we go to the next question.
Yeah, well, I just want to touch on what Jacob said. And look, I live in Wyoming. I'm an attorney. We're the best represented state, right? We federally. We have 2 senators and a congressperson for a little over 500,000 people. And yet I can't talk to my representative. And I think the problem that I see is the learned helplessness. And I spent a lot of time talking to the people who don't vote, right? Who have given up they don't show up to the ballot box. And I see that as a direct result of our federal politics over the last 100 years. And that if you don't get a say in where your federal tax dollars are spent, right, or how they're raised, and you don't have a say in where your sons and daughters go to war, that breeds a certain level of I can't do anything about the most important questions, and so it's hard for me to care about the state and local issues. And so while I agree that the state and local issues are, of superlative importance, it is difficult for people to be engaged with them if they simultaneously have zero say at the federal level. And so it's one of the reasons my firm belief is that if we can increase representation at the federal level such that people have a spark of hope, of trust, in our federal government, in our federal representatives again, then you're going to see people jumping to engage at the state and local level on the school boards in a way that is, again, a little bit less polarized than it currently is. I think that when you have, it's been multiple generations, right? We're talking about the cap. It was formalized in 1929, but it goes all the way back to 1910, 1911, when they kept failing to reapportion after the decennial census. And so, obviously that was before I was born. I think it was before anyone here was born. And we're just multiple generations into accepting a federal politics that is, frankly, just too far removed from the people to instill in them any hope. And so that's, I think in a lot of ways it is somewhat qualitative versus quantitative in my mind, right? That if you can instill hope in people, if you can bring them back to the table, the opportunity to educate them, right? To engage with them, and this comes back to the definition of representation. Then we start to see more, I think, engagement at the local level. All right, I'll stop yapping, Jeff. Back to you for the next question.
All right. So question 1 is, what is the message that we need from our leaders? Okay. Question 2 is, what does a good leader look like? Like, who are good leaders? How do we judge who a good leader is? So Jacob, Chris went first last time, so I'm going to let you go first this time. What do you like? Shape me your leader. Like, what do you see in that person?
I see we're starting off with the easy questions off the bat. But yeah, so I sort of want to break it down a little bit, because right in the United States we have federalist structure where you have federal leaders, state leaders, local leaders, all ideally focusing on different realms. And I'll narrow this down a little bit to looking at political leadership. And when I'm looking for a local leader, I'm looking for someone who is focused on addressing your everyday issues, someone who is cares deeply about the community they're from and is working towards that. And I'll sort of look at that for state leaders too, but I'm also looking to see do they have that broader focus? Do they have that are they able to see just beyond whatever district they're coming from to address the concerns of the whole? And federal leaders, ideally I'm looking for a federal leader who's willing, more than whose first instinct is to leave the rest of us alone. But more seriously, I'm looking for someone who, and I don't know if this is strictly what you consider a traditional leadership trait, but especially at the federal level, I'm not looking for someone who's a micromanager. I'm not looking for someone who's going to write bills and policy and focus on little issues, right? The federal government has its own lane, or as we call it in Hawaii, kuleana. And the kuleana of the federal government is big national issues, international issues. And I'm not looking for someone who's going to be some TikTok star or wannabe TikTok star focusing on whatever local controversy there is, or, what have you. So trying to put a little bit of a different spin on it. And obviously, up and down the leadership chain, I'm looking for someone who's trustworthy, honorable. I'm looking for someone ideally who's not touched by scandal or isn't suspected of corruption. I think especially over the last 8 years, looking for that type of leadership, and someone who's not afraid to tell the truth and to be honest. And maybe, if you make a mistake, take the hit on the chin, right? I think when you look at, two successful successful presidents, JFK and Ronald Reagan, they took ownership of where they fell short, right? JFK took ownership of the failure of the Bay of Pigs, and that was important for people to see, like, hey, we made a mistake, we accept that this went wrong. And then Reagan took ownership of the Iran Contra scandal, and that restored people's trust in Reagan, which was starting to go wobbly, because they saw someone who acknowledged they screwed up and took responsibility for it. So especially after Trump and Biden, looking for someone who's willing to take responsibility and admit when something hasn't gone right.
So thank you. What I hear there is you want somebody who's solution oriented, who has geographic ties to the community, who can see the big picture, who understands the limited power of our government, who's virtuous, will make good decisions, but when they make bad decisions, they'll take responsibility for it and own their mistakes. Is that what I hear?
Pretty much. Sounds so simple when you say it.
You said it all, not me. And I think that's exactly what people should be looking for in a leader. So I'm going to go to Roger next, because he's been a little time since he's got in here. I'm going to let you get to this question next. And so Jacob talked a lot about like what that person embodies. How do you think we get that person? Where does that person come from, Roger? Do you have any clue? Can you help us out on this one?
Where does that person come from? Well, the person doesn't come from the sales force. It's been some time now, but there was a TED talk by an author who wrote a book about introverts. And she made the point that, it was only in the 20th century that the salesman, the extrovert, that personality type became celebrated, right? Back in the day, it was the thinkers, it was the Jeffersons and the Madisons and so forth that got the attention. It wasn't the salesman, and things have flopped. And I think that's part of the challenge that we face is we have a populace that is fascinated with celebrity. There was something on the TV the other day about a bunch of baseball players running for office, right? A bunch of retired Major League Baseball players are running for office now. And they have a good shot at winning just on the basis of celebrity. I think that's a problem. We need to go further back to a more intellectual, a more introspective kind of intelligence, and spend less time listening to the marketing that's coming from the podium.
So I tend to agree a little bit with you. We need less performative leaders. However, I'll push back and I'll say, like, well, there was Madison and there was Jefferson. There was also Patrick Henry. And
yeah.
he was a great orator, right? And if you go back, to the original forming of democracy in Athens, being a great orator is how you got things done. You had to be able to speak to people and guide people. And I think I'm going to jump in front here, and I'm going to give you a little bit of what I think about what makes a good leader. A good leader typically comes from the middle class, okay? They have strong role models, they respect authority, and they have a balance between themselves and their emotion and their reason, right? And these are two really important things, because I think it's the emotion that really makes somebody a great orator, but it's the reason that helps somebody be a great thinker. And balancing these two things is what you get really great leaders. And I think you see that a lot with Washington, who maybe wasn't as strong of a thinker, and people don't think of him as an emotional guy because he was so stoic, but that was because he was keeping that stuff under wraps. He was holding his emotion in because he knew he had to be a certain type of leader for the country at the time. And I think we're desperately missing that right now in our country. Go ahead.
There's a crucial difference. Patrick Henry and those cats like that, they could deliver, right? They could get it done. They weren't just salesmen. That's what we've got now. They're just salesmen. They can't get it. They can't. It's all hat, no cattle. All sizzle, no steak. Pick your euphemism.
So there's a great book. It's been out for a while. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow, and I've been reading it recently. And it breaks every person down, their brain, And the way it works, it's system 1 and system 2. And system 1 is basically your survival instincts, your emotion, right? How you perceive the world as you see it, and you make quick decisions with it. And system 2 is it's kind of your reason. It's where you slow down and you think about things a little bit more deeply. And balancing those two things, to your point, you can't be all system 1 and all emotion and all sales guy. Like you said, you got to be able to back it up with system 2, right? And system 1 people typically, like, they absorb a lot of information and they can regurgitate it, but then they're empty because they don't have anywhere to go because they never spend time actually learning. And I think that's, to your point, that's the sales guy who's got no substance. But let's bring Chris on this. I jumped in a little early here. Sorry, I got tied into Roger's response there. Chris, what do you see a good leader? What is a good leader to you?
Jacob just expressed everything that embodies that, I think, and you guys played into it really well. It's for me personally, character matters. Strangely enough, that's something that George H.W. Bush said when he first ran for president, or actually second time he ran for president, 1988. And then later on, other people have said the same thing in different parties. It just kind of caught on, even though sometimes it didn't matter when they got into office, but it does matter. And I would like to see us get to a point where we have a leader in this country. If we're talking about president, but you could go all the way down the line to Senate and to House too. And we need to get rid of this reality show mentality that we have in our country, and that may get to a deeper discussion, a totally different conversation about the social culture and our moral fiber in our country right now, and where we stand as a country as far as that's concerned. But if we could eliminate that, and if the voting base, our voters in our country, could start to look at the actual messaging, getting back to your first question, that is out there by candidates, and as opposed to just being appealed by messages that are, I don't know, it just, you have 77 million people have voted for Trump, and he had really no message whatsoever other than what he was about, the cats and the dogs and the tariffs and all this other garbage and nonsense that we knew that most of us rational people didn't want. Again, that's my first priority. Getting back to your question, is character, is also, to Jacob's point, taking responsibility when things go wrong. You say, hey, our administration, we screwed up. Or if a senator or a congressman does something that, hey, I screwed up, or I voted wrong on that legislation or whatever, and here's the reason. Of course, their voters can tell whether or not they're lying or not. This kind of stuff happens when you're a lawmaker, when you're in politics. But that's just, if we can get back to that place of normalcy again, I think that's where I'd like to be. That's what I see in a leader, is just someone that can, be transparent, be responsible, and have some character and decency, and be principled too about it.
I have a follow-up for Chris. Since you're in California, what's your position on Gavin Newsom's trolling of Trump on X?
I'm loving it. I'm being an anti-Trumper, a never Trumper, at least since 2020. I'm actually taking it all in and going, yay, it gives me something to laugh at night, right? It's not that I would ever necessarily vote for Newsom for president. I had a hard trouble pulling the lever for him for governor this last time around. In fact, I think I skipped altogether and didn't vote, or wrote in a name. But yeah, that's my thought on it. It's humor, and I think he's doing a good job. He's doing it right. He's doing what other Democrats are not. He found something to get that might be getting stuck in Trump's craw, right? And
so
the other leaders aren't doing it.
So I'll push back on you. I'll say he's not doing it right. He's doing exactly the wrong thing. And if the guy who's in charge is acting bad, for somebody that wants that power, they should be acting good. And if you're just acting like the person that you say is bad to get power, then aren't you just the same thing? Like, again, it's like we're back to power.
Yeah.
But he's absolutely after power. He wants to run for president. Everybody knows it, right? And back to Jacob's first thing and what he wants to see in a good leader is solutions oriented. When you're speaking the way that he's speaking, and when you're trying to capture power or capture attention the way that he's trying to capture attention, you're not solutions oriented. You are dividing oriented. You're trying to push people away from the guy that you don't like and toward you. But what you should be doing is trying to grab everybody and put them and unite them together for one common cause of solving some problems. And frankly, I just don't see him doing that. But anyways, I haven't got to Walter. Walter's been waiting so patiently. Walter, what do you see in a great leader?
Well, I think a good leader is representative of the people. And so then the question is, well, what does it mean to be representative? What is representation? What's the definition of representation? And I think it's bidirectional education and action. And I think that I haven't heard the word education yet, but I think this is the core of the problem, right? That if you're acting, you're not educating, right? And if you're an orator, if you're orating, often you're not educating, you're misdirecting. And so although it can be useful if you're lying while you're giving your oration, ultimately it should come back to bite you in the butt. And I think that's kind of gets at this issue that you're talking about, Jeff, with Gavin, is that, he's not really educating, he's dividing. And although it is humorous, and all like a lot of what Trump says is funny too, but like disturbing, right? And
when it's funny, it is disturbing, in my opinion. Like, I don't want my leaders to be funny. I want them to be serious. You know, I think the reason that education is so important is, so going back to Kahneman and Tversky's work and Thinking Fast and Slow, which you mentioned, one of the points that they make is that type 2 thinking or logical thinking, prefrontal cortex work is very energy intensive, and so we deprioritize it, right? Our brains, they fall back to type 1 thinking or system 1 thinking, where it's all about heuristics and basically judging people based on the groups that they're in. And it's easy for people to exploit that, right? It's very easy to hijack people's system 1 brains, and it's relatively difficult to get them to engage in type 2 thinking. And if we want them to be engaged in type 2 thinking, we need leaders who educate, right? Who are focused on saying, dear constituents, I'm asking you to do the hard thing and come along with me and learn about, what it is that's going on, so that I can explain to you, how I got this right or wrong. And I think that shows the character, right? Is the character of a person, to me, is embodied in their ability to listen and learn from their constituents, and then educate their constituents and take actions on behalf of their constituents that are, if not wholly consistent with the majority of their constituents' positions, they at least can explain to their constituents why they may have deviated slightly, because they had this, special information that their constituents didn't have. So let me tell you about that. So for me, it's all about education in the world of leadership or representation. And like we always say, listen and inform. Listen and inform. Listen to the people that you lead and inform them, just like what Walter's saying. Education, education, education. So real quick, we've had a great show. I've loved this conversation. I've got 3 quick questions here that I'm going to, 4 reform questions. You guys already know what they are, okay? I'm going to come back to the last hard question that we have. I'm going to do that at the end. And these 4 questions, what I want is, let's just do a lightning round because we're running out of time here. I'm going to ask you about the reform. I want you to tell me if you support it or if you don't support it, and then just a 30-second of why. And if you don't know yet because you haven't thought about it enough or you need more research, just feel free just to give me your initial gut reaction about it. And, just let us know, like, hey, I'm still researching it. Nobody's going to hold it against you next time you run for office. Don't worry. Um, so the first one is, and let's see, is so there's a book out I read last year called "Filthy Rich Politicians." Matt Lewis had put it out where he suggests paying our representatives more. And there was a recent New York Times article out as well just recently about this called "Pay the Bums More," right? What do you think about that? If our leaders are bad, what do you think about attracting better leaders through better pay? Jacob, I'm going to start with you. Yes or no? And then 30 seconds, real quick.
Yes, pay our leaders more. I think, you need to, being, especially on the federal level, being a representative, grueling work. A lot goes unseen. It's not just debating on the House floor or the Senate floor. And I think if you look abroad, there's very much support for you get better talent by paying politicians more. I'll point to the example of Singapore, notoriously clean politics, and they have high quality leaders and they pay them appropriately. So yes, pay more, you'll get better quality.
Perfect on the timing, Jacob. I love it. We're like a professional show now. Chris, I'm going to go to you next. Yes or no? 30 seconds on why.
I'll be unprofessional because I hate to disagree with my friend, but I don't think that our leaders or our representatives should be paid more. We just had the situation happen here in California in my local district where my board of supervisors, it was just voted for them to receive double their salary from what they were previously getting, and it has angered a lot of people around here saying, "Oh, they're not doing enough for us," and it's not because of salary. They're doing just fine on their own. So some of them have side jobs, and I think it depends on the level of government that you're in. So no. And then what's the second half of your question? Sorry.
No, that was it. Just should we pay our representatives more? I think we're talking specifically federal. So at a federal congressional representative, the senator and the rep, would you pay them more?
I would do it on a sliding scale. For example, I would do it as if they get reelected, then that's a sign that, okay, they're doing a good job. I would do it as an incentive. I would pay them more as an incentive. So, for example, you start them off at one salary their first term, and if they get reelected, okay, then raise them up a little bit at that point.
All right, Walter, yes or no?
Yes, I would pay our federal representatives more, mostly because, they hold the power of the purse. We're talking about $1 trillion budget, and the incentives are to steal or be stolen by special interests. And so you need to counteract that by, offering them money that is that's untethered to special interests. And I like Chris's idea of maybe creating incentives. I think incentives run the world. Certainly maybe if they are running important committees or doing certain checking certain boxes, maybe they could get some additional funds. I have a very wealthy client of mine agrees. He's like, why would anybody in their right mind go be a congressional representative unless they can steal, right? I mean, like that's the only
No,
situation.
come on.
I mean, because otherwise, I mean, I think Jacob's right. It's like totally grueling, and half the country hates you, and you're getting death threats, etc.
Yeah, but it's like graduate school, man. They're just going to leverage that for the think tank job or the academic job or the corporate board or whatever.
Right, but that's the problem. That's the wrong incentive. All right, I was over 30 seconds. Go, Roger.
That's okay, Walter. You're president. We're going to let it slide. Roger, your turn.
My thoughts run along the same lines as Chris. I was thinking of it as, yes, pay them more, but the new portion has to be at risk. But the word incentive sounds better, so let's call it an incentive. Warren Buffett has this idea of, if you don't pass the budget on time, then you're not eligible for re-election, something like that. Or if you don't pass something within 3% of balance, you're not eligible for re-election. Hey, that's incentive. That's the kind of stuff that would help.
All right, you guys did a great job, except for Walter, but we're going to give him a mulligan on that one. Our next question is, it's one of the most popular reforms I've heard about growing up. The Convention of the States, I think this is their main reform, and that is term limits. You read about this, it polls really well. Americans love the idea of term limits, yet somehow it never gets done. Chris, should we do it? Yes or no, and why or why not? 30 seconds.
Yes, and I don't know why it hasn't been done sooner. Uh, we we have it locally. Our governor, as you know, who we just spoke about, is term limited and can't run again. So next year, as in fact. But nationally, yeah, it should apply. We do not need people who are 95 years old serving in the House of Representatives or in the Senate for that matter, or people with health problems. At some point, you got to term them out. And also, we need fresh blood and younger ideas and new ideas as the country is evolving and changing, and you have new generations that are coming in, and different ways of doing things and thinking of things in different ways. If you have people that have been there 20 or 30 years, those all of those things that you want to change, it becomes harder to do. So I think there needs to be a more frequent turnover in the House.
All right, Jacob, you nailed it last time. Yes or no? 30 seconds. Why or why not?
So, term limits for executives, yes, I think we've got that pretty good. The 2 4-year terms seems to work pretty well. For legislators, I am against term limits. I think what would be more effective, sort of getting to Chris's point, would be a mandatory retirement age where you don't serve, say, past 75, right? And I base this on it can be really challenging to get legislative term limits right, especially since we only have 2-year terms for the US House. So if you have them cut too short, you don't really build that legislative experience and seniority that makes working in Congress more effective. But if you set the term limits too long, it's going to make then it's kind of meaningless. So I think it would be better to do mandatory retirement age for legislators vice term limits.
Interesting. Let's see. I can't remember who went first last time. Well, Roger, your turn. Yes or no?
Okay.
Why?
No to term limits, yes to age limits.
Ooh.
Sorry, Chris, but addressing some of the points you had, it's more about age, in my opinion, than the length of service. And honestly, it's a complex world. We deal with complicated stuff. Why should we arbitrarily expel expertise from Congress just when it's been developed?
I love
Technically,
that
we already
argument.
have term limits. It's called the vote, right? Yeah, but it's a long conversation we could have about that. But I'm opposed to term limits. I'm okay with age limits.
All right, Walter, close it out. Yes or no? Why or why not? 30 seconds this time. We're clocking you. There's going to be a buzzer.
So I'm a no on term limits. I think it ends up empowering lobbyists because lobbyists don't have term limits, so they would end up writing the legislation. I would be in favor of an age limit. I think even better than that would be cognitive testing. I also think we should have a window into the health of our representatives, right? Like, why do people have to take drug tests to drive trucks on the road, but not to legislate? So
Interesting. Drug tests the congressional representatives. I like that. That's something we should all be able to get. Maybe they would change the laws in DC if they did that. It wouldn't smell like weed every time I walk in anymore. Okay. So
Dude, it would still smell like weed in DC. Come on.
all right. So Osita Nuevu, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He was on the New York Times podcast recently, and he talks potentially about a lot of big changes, and one of the ones that gets brought up is the Senate. He points out the imbalance of apportionment from state to state. He specifically calls out Wyoming and how they have more representation by far than specifically California, where Chris is from. You guys are literally from the two states mentioned. And he suggests potentially abolishing the Senate. So, yes or no? Why or why not? 30 seconds. Oh,
That
I
is
gotta
not
tell.
something I.
Go
You
ahead.
mean?
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I forgot to call on somebody, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Because Jacob went first last time. I don't know that I have, really even thought about that until like you said, I knew the question was coming. I have, I don't know. It's almost like, when you speak of, uncapping the House, and expanding the number of legislators, we already have the Senate, which it sort of helps, but then you have these two bodies there. I'd have to study it. I'd have to study that and the purpose, the true purpose and meaning of the House and Senate and how they work together legislatively to really address that.
I think that's a great answer. I think that's exactly what Jacob was talking about when somebody says just responsibility. Maybe if you don't know, don't talk about it, right? And just say like, "Hey, I got to learn more about that." Maybe our leaders could learn from you. Jacob, we're gonna go next to you.
All right, yeah, I will say keep the keep the Senate, but the Senate does need to have an overhaul, and I think two key areas would be get rid of the filibuster. The filibuster's been incredibly abused. I'd like to point to the historic example of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, where every member of their legislature had an ultimate veto on anything, so it was impossible to get any government reforms done, and the country eventually imploded. That's an extreme example. And then also, I think the powers of the Senate should be weakened a bit, right? When you look at other larger advanced industrial economies, you don't see such a powerful upper chamber, especially controlling confirmation appointments to the cabinet, to the executive. So I would like to see the powers of the Senate reduced a little bit, sort of in the way the House of Lords functions in the British Parliament, or the House of Councillors in Japan's Parliament, where the lower house can override, if necessary, the any block or disapproval from the upper house.
Interesting. We'll have to come back to that on a later show. Roger, you're up next. Yes or no? Why or why not? 30 seconds.
There's no need to abolish the Senate. I have a more radical suggestion. Throwback to my days as the radicalized economist on X, right? I think we should merge some of the less populous states. Some of these states that are unable to raise the revenue to be self-sustaining don't deserve to have a whole state, let alone 2 senators. I say we should. Why do we need 2 Dakotas? What's up with that? Come on, let's merge that shit. Come on.
Oh,
And that will help us in the interest of Senate reform, but it'll also help us in financially. So that's my radical solution. No need to abolish the Senate.
so you heard it here first. No more North Dakota, no more South Dakota, just Middle Dakota.
And you talk about North and South Carolina too. I'm here, but that's a different conversation. There's a lot more people here. The Dakotas are sparsely populated. There's a lot of Kansas, Nebraska. Put it all out there. I'm gonna get some hate mail now, baby.
Oh man, yeah, we got some radical ideas now. All right, Walter. It's funny that you took the abolish the Senate idea and you made it more radical. But Walter, yes or no? Abolish the Senate. Why or why not? 30 seconds. Go time.
Yeah, hard no on abolishing the Senate. I think we need that balance between the small states and the big states, or the less populous and the more populous states. That was the original Connecticut Compromise, and I think you need that balance to effectively uncap the House. They obviously also have longer terms, and you keep a little bit more continuity. And the last thing I would say is, if anything is going to change in the Senate, it needs to happen after we uncap the House, so that the people again trust the reform. A lot of people talk about repealing the 17th Amendment. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but any constitutional amendment should be passed by a Congress that we trust, not one we don't trust.
All right. So our next question, 30 seconds. Now this isn't a yes or no, so this is going to be a little bit tougher. All right. So I read this book recently called The Primary Solution by Nick. I can't read that upside down. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I apologize, Nick, if you're watching. It's a great book. It lays out a lot of the problems that we're having, the polarization, and his solution is the primary solution. He wants to abolish partisan primaries. He says that the incentives to win create the polarization, and that we need to do something about the primary process. Walter, Roger, you guys know, we've talked about RCV on the show. We've talked about star voting on the show. So should we change the primary system? Yes or no? What should we do about it? I made it a yes or no question. Anyways, Jacob, you go first.
Hey, definitely, I think, I'll go more radical and say abolish the entire primary system. We shouldn't have primaries. Primaries have just become a tool for well-entrenched and organized special interests to dominate party nominating processes. I think, we should go back to party conventions and party leaders and party committees choosing who's going to appear on the ballot for their party. I think, ultimately America got better leadership in that time period. And, I love making comparisons abroad. If you look abroad, no other political party in other countries, they don't use primaries. It was a uniquely American experiment. It worked for a little bit. It's not working anymore. And just get rid of primaries, go back to party-dominated processes where it's some sort of party committee, convention that decides who's on the ballot.
All right, I'm going to go to Walter next because he's been waiting to the last couple times. Should we do something about the primaries? What should we do? 30 seconds.
Yeah, we should uncap the House, and that would temporarily eliminate the stranglehold that the two parties have, and that would introduce third parties, at least temporarily, and then I think one of the two parties, whichever one did not champion uncapping the House, I think would end up being transformed. And I do like caucusing, and I'm not opposed to some of the things Jacob was saying, but I don't think it's the fundamental problem. And I would say it's something I need to study probably a little bit more before I can give you a definitive answer.
All right, Chris, your turn. What should we do about the primaries? Should we change the primaries? Yes or no? What should we do?
First of all, great answers from Jacob and Walter. I agree with you guys both. It does need overhaul or abolishment altogether if you want to go that far. Jacob's right. It doesn't. The primary process doesn't work anymore. It's corrupted, as we've seen with the Republican primary, even the Democrat primary now too. It's corrupted by special interests. It's corrupted by a lot of things, and unfortunately, the results are we get the candidates that we get. And if this went back to how it was during FDR and Truman's time, when even there were primaries, but there were sort of popularity contests more or less, and they were just to kind of give Americans an idea of who they wanted in the role of president. Perhaps just letting the conventions make the decision, I think, and let the delegates choose would be better than throwing it out there to the populace en masse.
All right, Roger, your turn. Should we change the primary system? Why? Yes or no?
Absolutely. I say go to the jungle primary. Break the primary system and rein in the parties to some extent, if not, break the party stranglehold on our political processes. But reforming the primaries, abolishing them, or going to a jungle primary, any of these things are going to have the benefit of lessening the party's grip on our political life.
So before we go we got one more hard question that's not a yes or no or 30 second. Before we go to that, I'm going to give my answers on this. We got, should we pay them more representatives? I mean, we could, or we could uncap the House and hire more of them so they could actually handle the job, and then we wouldn't have to pay them so much because they'd be doing less work. It'd be an easier job for them.
Good answer.
Should we have term limits? I mean, we could have term limits, or we can go back to the original size of the House and uncap the House, making it easier for the citizen to term limit their own representative by having a smaller group, building a smaller coalition, and getting them out of office when it comes. Should we abolish the Senate? I mean, we could abolish the Senate, or we could balance the disproportionate representation between the small and the large states by enlarging the House of Representatives, giving California more representation in Congress and not taking away Wyoming's representation. So I think, and then the primary solution, I think we need to do something about our primaries. I'm kind of with you guys. I'm not sure what that thing is yet, but I do agree that we need to do it. And what I do know is if you want to fix the primary problem, then you have to uncap the House, right? Because it's going to be easier to get 435, put pressure on those people to uncap the House, and then you hire more people who can actually do the thinking, the solution-oriented, geographic tied to the community, big picture, limited power with virtue, who owns their mistake and takes responsibility. You have to elect those people if you want to have a primary solution, and it forces the rest of the states to act. As Nick talks about in his book, this is a state-by-state issue with the primaries. And, you can make action on the local level with this. By uncapping the House, you force action. with the primaries, with the states to take action on this sooner than later. And as Louis Brandeis, I can't say his name.
Brandeis.
Is it Brandeis?
Yes.
He says the states are great laboratories of democracy, right? So you could test this stuff out. You can do this. So that's my take on that. Let's go to the last question. How do we change the political environment? I'm going to go to Walter first on this because he's been super patient. Walter, how do we change the political environment?
I think we need representation. The word representation has to be in the zeitgeist of American lexicon, right? We need people, welders, electricians, high school dropouts, musicians, theater actors, Hollywood actors. Everyone needs to be talking about what is representation, like what's the definition, what's your definition, and how do we get it? How do we get quality representation at the federal level? And I think unless we do that, we're going to continue to spiral without trust in the American government. And this is particularly dangerous at this moment where AI really is set to transform every aspect of our society. And China has one model, top down, and America's had a different model, bottom up. And we have the opportunity to go back to bottom up. And that's what needs to return, and the only way is through representation.
I love that answer. Jacob, let's get you in here next.
I think, right, I'm going to break this answer up here in a little bit. I think, for, what can we do to change the political environment, right, in the near term, right, within the next election cycle or two. It's just getting involved in everyday civics, right? Pay attention to what your town council or county council are doing. Pay attention to get involved in, all sort of this lower level stuff. Over the medium term, right, over the next few years, taking us to 2030, uncap the House, right? This is probably one of the most important, easily attainable political reforms on the federal level we can do and we can get at, and that can help alleviate some of our broader problems, especially disparities between states, representation, things like that. And then over the longer term, right, if people are patient enough, we can really do more to build consensus on constitutional reform. If you look at American history, constitutional reform comes in bursts. We had the Bill of Rights, 11th and 12th Amendments at the very beginning as the Founding Fathers tweaked their project. We had the Civil War Reconstruction Amendments, right after the Civil War, where, enshrining equal rights for all Americans. And then we had a couple more bursts in the 20th century, and we haven't had meaningful constitutional reform in quite a while. So I think this is, if we're patient, if we work towards building consensus, we can get some really meaningful constitutional reform to help make representation better. But in the near medium term, focus on what's going on in your hometown, in your home state, and write to your representative to pass a bill expanding the size of the House.
Love it. Chris, your turn. How do we change the political environment?
I think you guys have already hit the nail on the head for me. I think it's like Mr. Smith goes to Washington. We need more Mr. Smiths who represent America, represent people, those doctors, those business people, those people that work on their ranches, people that, just have the average American day-to-day jobs that want to represent their families, their friends, their neighborhoods, their churches, their communities. We need more of that, I think, and a lot less of people who are looking more toward their egos to try and get somewhere with their CV or whatever it is. That's not helping us right now. If we have, I think better representation can be all those things I just mentioned, and plus what's been said.
Excellent. Roger. How do we change the political environment?
I only know one way to change anybody's mind about anything, and that's data and logic. I mean, that's what works on me, right? Like most people, I tend to view things through the lens of my own experience, right? I rely on data and logic to win arguments, and when that fails, I'm kind of adrift. I keep trying to bring it back to, the data or the logic or something of that nature until my mom calls and I have to go home for dinner, which is my excuse often to get out of conversations like that.
So Chris mentioned something, we need the regular people to be able to make decisions. And I think that goes to Walter's point, uncap the House. Give us a chance, give power back to the people. Let those regular people have a chance of winning office. It's really hard for a regular person who may just be a small business owner to try to campaign in a district that has nearly 800,000 people and covers 3 large counties. You have to have a lifestyle that allows you not to be at work for an extended period of time. And you have to have money and have friends to have money so you can afford to do all this stuff. And so
the backing of one party or the other, usually. So
that's right. Or the backing of one party or the other. And so, I think the key of how do you change the political environment is you have to have the right message. And if we're looking at the system right now, if we're looking at society right now, what everybody is telling us is they feel powerless. So the right message is to give them power, uncap the House. That's the message. And if you want to be successful in that, you have to have the right leaders. And as we talked about tonight, a great leader is somebody who is solutions oriented, who has geographical ties to their community, who's big picture, understands the limited power of our government, has some semblance of virtue, right and wrong, who will own their mistakes and takes responsibility for their actions. We need the right message with the right leaders, and then people need to get behind them. They need to donate to them. They need to give them money so they can have the tools at their disposal to win elections. We got to win elections in the House. We got to win elections in the Senate, and we have to uncap the House. We have to give power back to people. We have to have the right message, have the right leaders, and take the right actions. That's how we change the political environment, in my opinion. So this has been a great show, guys. I really appreciate it. Chris, Jacob, you guys have been fantastic. Walter, Roger, I really enjoy this format, going around the horn. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's been a lot of fun.
Dang, you were just getting wound up there, and now it's over.
I know I'm gonna come back. I'm just trying to wind down, get myself wind down. I'm that emotion with reason guy, right? Like I'm a lot system 1 and trying to be more system 2, So Walter, before we close out tonight, last thoughts. What do you want to leave the people with?
Go to the website, www.why435.org. Read the Declaration of Representation. Join us, right? Join the conversation. Influence the conversation. We're going to be working on a lot of very interesting projects, and you have the opportunity to enter today at the ground floor. And so go check it out. Give us your details, and you'll be talking personally to one of us, and look forward to meeting you.
And Walter, who do we have on our show next week? September 8th, right? Is that next Monday?
Yep, that would be Casey Maddox.
Casey
Maddox.
Maddox.
Confirmed with him.
Oh, her again?
Him.
Sorry. Yes.
Another lawyer.
Another lawyer.
Wasn't there was someone named whatever. I got them mixed up. My bad.
That's okay. I forget names all the time, which is why I asked Walter to help me out. Roger, what would you like to leave the people with tonight?
The last time the U.S. House was expanded, the Titanic was still seaworthy. Chew on that.
Oh, wow. That's a movie from my childhood right there. Chris, Jacob, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Last word from you, Chris, and then also mention about your group and how people can follow you. What nights do you have the spaces? Where can they find you at?
Sure. We just had a mini hiatus for summer, but we're back now on Saturday nights on X, about 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5:30 Pacific Time. And I think the best thing to do would be to follow me, Chris Rowan, or Jacob on X, and you'll see when those spaces are posted. Sometimes we do them on weeknights as well too. If we have a guest like Jeff might come on, we think. We're talking about that, or Roger, or Walter, or the whole group of you. We'd be glad to have you on the show. But we call it a show because it's sort of turning into one the way that we've got it orchestrated now, as opposed to just a space. It's a little bit more than that, and it's really grown, and we're happy with that, and happy to see that the numbers of people who come on, they ask. It's interesting, Jeff. They say, "Are these spaces always this, well run and calm and polite?" And I respond to them and I say, yes, they are. So they're just blown away that we actually have control over our groups as opposed to some other spaces that don't.
You know why I think that is, Chris? I think it's because you have such a soothing voice. I remember the first time I tuned in, I was like, this guy's got like the radio voice that everybody wants. I love it. Jacob, you're up next. Thank you for coming on the show. How do people find you? And any last words?
Hey, mahalo for having me on the show. You can find me on X at Jacob_Wiencek. I help co-host with Chris the new Rhino Coalition spaces, so be sure to tune in. Hopefully all of your viewers will be tuning in this coming Saturday so we can have a great show, great discussion. And something I always try to end our spaces with, and I'll end with here, is never forget that we all have agency to change things, not just in our lives, but in politics and civics and government, right? We can change the size of the House of Representatives and increase it from 435. We can change our representatives and hold them accountable for their misdeeds and misconduct. I forget who brought it up specifically, but we talked about learned helplessness politically. Don't be helpless. You have control, you have a vote, you have a voice that you can exercise at your local level, your state level, your federal level, and you can get it done right. So don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to reach out, and never forget that we are free citizens in a free republic. We have a voice. We have a say. Don't be silent.
I love it. Thank you guys for being on the show. And I know that I was supposed to do this at the beginning of the show, but I never introduced myself. Walter messaged me and told me about halfway through, but I just was really enjoying our conversation. I didn't want to interrupt. For those who tuned in and are wondering, who's this weird guy with the hat who's asking all these strange questions? My name's Jeff Mayhew. I'm a father of 5. I'm a small business owner and I have no representation. So I got involved, just like Jacob was saying. We do have agency. We do have power. All you have to do is try. And just keep working on it. And like Walter said, educate yourself. Educate. Learn the things that you need to learn so you can go to the people in power and you have the right words to talk to them. And like Walter said, that right word is representation. We need to uncap the House, and you can help us. You can go to www.y435.org. You can make a donation. You can, most importantly, sign our declaration. Let our leaders know that you want this thing by signing our declaration on our website. And you can also sign up to volunteer. We love the help. So again, thank you all for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate it. Peace, love, and representation. Thank you for tuning in to the Representation Station. Don't forget to visit our website at www.y435.org and sign the Declaration for Representation. And don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on X at NoCapFund, on Facebook, NoCapFund, on YouTube at Uncap the House, and on Instagram at NoCapFund. Thank you, and don't forget, peace, love, and representation.